Hello again, it's Susan Milner with Florida Future Realty, and in the last part of our series, we wrote up a really good offer, but it might not be good enough. The seller might not have liked your offer, so now we're going to talk about negotiating that offer to make it a contract. Now, there are some issues that can happen here. Sometimes I see a buyer or a seller get offended by an offer or a counter offer, and that's just no good. You can't get offended. This is just business and negotiations, and don't let it get emotional. I've also unfortunately found agents that get all emotional and try to make decisions on behalf of their customer. So in those situations, you need to make sure that your offer or counter offer is actually getting to the correct party. So it can get a little tricky. But hopefully you wrote an awesome offer and you can just skip this series and it got accepted. But if it didn't and we negotiate, let's talk about some of these things. Let's say there's an awesome chandelier in the house and you wanted it and the seller said, nope, we are definitely taking that. You know what? So what? Let them have it. You don't need their chandelier, okay? You can get your own, or you don't need one right now, okay? Let's say that, they countered back at a later closing date because you're not ready to move and you have to go because your lease is going to be up or something. Take a deep breath. It's okay. Think about, is there anybody that I could stay with for a few days so I don't have to go in a hotel? There probably is. Always think about the solution to whatever they're countering with. And think about their situation too, the seller and where they're going and what they need to do. In our state, it's very typical that the day of closing is the day that the buyer takes possession, so that means that the sellers need to be out. So, maybe they needed more time. I don't really like to negotiate to have sellers stay in the house past closing or have buyers move in the house prior to closing. I want to make sure that everything is done and settled before people start taking possession. And once the buyers own it, I don't want the sellers to stay in there because it could just have a lot of problems. And then you're worrying about, well, who's maintaining the property, whose insurance is in effect, and if something does happen, does the deal still close? Doesn't it close? So we just don't like to do that. So try not to negotiate that unless it's just like have to. If you need 3% concessions in order to get your loan and the seller said no, make sure that you write back and explain that you do need that in order to be able to purchase their home. And maybe you offer them a little bit more than you were originally going to offer and still ask for that 3% because that's the only way the deal is going to happen. So keep that in mind. If they come back and they want more money in escrow, think about their feelings too. The seller wants to make sure that you're legitimate. If you ask for a 15-day inspection period and they came back offering 7, that's totally reasonable. If you offer $200,000 and they come back at $250,000, you guys are kind of far away, but I still stress, don't give up hope. Still counter until you can come a little closer in price. Your agent's going to be able to give you guidance on this. If you didn't in the original offer write that letter that I suggested, this might be a time to, with your counter, write that letter explaining how much you really want this house and what it means to you. And then that seller might read your letter and say, you know what, we can give a little bit. We're going to make this deal go. So that's kind of it. Negotiations, just if you really want the house, the seller really wants to sell, don't give up too easily. Don't get offended by counter offers and, peddly things like appliances and chandeliers and that kind of stuff. Just don't get all, up in arms. Like this, don't get crazy over a few $1,000s either, because over the life of your 30-year loan, it's, for peace of mind and having the house you want, it's really not that big of a deal. I hope you get the house you want, and I hope you don't have to go through a lot of negotiations, but more likely than not, you're at least going to have a counter or two before you come to an agreement, and that's just very typical. So until next week, when we're going to talk about everything that you need to do in order to get to closing with the lender and those sort of things. So we will see you then.